Welcome to another Reaper blog video. Today I'm going through my mix for Batter Hum's House on the Beach. It's kind of a pop punk song. It's available now everywhere. And if you're into pop punk, Blink-182, that sort of kind of happy, feel good guitar rock stuff, you'll like it. So let's start off by just playing the track.
Fancy, but it's kind of nice. I'd like to move there when the time is right, but in the meantime I'll just sit and dream about that picture in the magazine. It says a place is still available. It's like it's straight out of a movie scene. Life is too short to waste another minute. Don't wait around, everything has a limit. It always seems like it's just out of reach. Let's say it's not about that sweet house right on the beach.
So there you go. That's the song, and it's a pretty cool track. It was definitely inspired by like Blink-182, classic pop punk stuff. Good vibes, and the approach for the mix was thick guitars, punchy drums, and overall clean and tight sound. Let's start off with the drums here, bypassing the master effects and any of the individual tracks effects. It also made this track, which was a sample layer. Here's what the drums sound like on their own. So I think I worked in a top-down approach, and I did a bunch of things on the drum bus, first of all. So I've got Parallel Aggressor from Baby Audio. I've got the BX Townhouse Compressor, SSL style. I think I've featured these before on the blog. I've got Toneboosters Real Bus version 3, and then I've got a Re-EQ, which is just taming the bass a little bit with and without bus effects. Just right there, it's doing quite a lot to shape the sound and to give an overall vibe. So let's look at the kick tracks now. So I've got a kick bus where most of the effects are happening. So I have Transpire from Sonic Anomaly, the EQ73 from IK Multimedia, and I've got a Re-EQ, and I've got a Recomp. So that's all post-processing on the actual kick mic, which has just this EQ on it. So it's a resonant high pass with some sort of harmonics adding in there. I've also split the kick signal into a second track, which is just the highs, to have a controllable amount of high frequencies in there. So I'm actually doing more high frequencies than the actual original kick sound. So here's just the kick. And without effects. So big difference. Wasn't really a terrible sound or anything, didn't need to be sample replaced, but it needed some help. Moving on to the snare, there's a lot of stuff happening on the bus. And then I've got a printed trigger track. The original trigger track is here. The sounds I'm triggering are from I Want That Sound. I think it's the 1985 pack. I was having some issues with, I think, the first version of the rendered mix, where just something was happening and it wasn't consistent. And I don't know if I'll be able to actually find it in here, but there's some parts that I had to edit because they were just like triggering something weird, and I had to replace notes, which on their own sounded exactly the same, but just somehow they would like go out of phase or something with the other tracks. And yeah, it was a really, really strange thing. In context of the whole mix, I would lose something with like this snare right here. Let's make sure that's on screen. So if I solo this, it kind of sounds like 3 of the same snares. And then if I undo that edit, pretty much the same. For some reason, that particular snare sample would just get masked every single time it played. So I had to like go through the song and make sure that it was working with the original snare tracks. So speaking of snare tracks, there's a snare top and bottom track here. So those are giving a lot of detail. There's a kind of a natural ambience to them, and there's a little bit of bleed, which doesn't sound too bad, really. So I'm processing these in this way. Got the snare top on the left and the snare bottom on the right. And then that's being sent into the trigger, like I said, and I printed it. And then that track also has just a very slight 1.5 dB boost at 120 hertz. All the snares together sound like this. If I take away the sample, most of the bass is lost. So let's look at processing on the snare bus. We've got a gate and an EQ and a compressor and a transient shaper and another EQ. This is a Neve style EQ. And then I've got a clipper. And so that's quite a lot of stuff happening there. It's also being sent to a reverb. So let's hear the snare without effects on the snare bus. I don't think that can really be any more different, but that's all basically EQ and compression happening there. And I'm doing that on the snare bus. So I was listening to the original snare, I was improving it on the bus and adding in that sample to fill in the bass. And yeah, so it doesn't always make sense when you break it down the opposite direction. Tom tracks are Steven Slate samples. So I actually didn't print these. Here's the original tom sounds. So hard edited to remove the bleed. And that's how it was delivered. And a lot of times you get tracks like that and you just have to kind of deal with it. In the third chorus, there's actually a side stick part, and all I did was split that off from the original recording onto its own track, the top mic, just so I'd have more control over the volume and EQ if I wanted. So I actually took off kind of the EQ here that was already there because I actually wanted more bass on that side stick. And then it's going into a reverb as well. The main snare bus is going into a reverb, but I just needed a little bit more on that side stick. So here's how the side stick sounds. And I also have the snare bottom. And without effects. I think that's a good trick. Just split off any sounds that you want to process independently. Reaper has unlimited tracks, so it's easy to do that kind of stuff. On the overheads, I'm using the Toneboosters EQ3, and I've got a low cut on the side channel, cutting at 74 hertz in band 6. I've got this on all channels, and it's a high shelf filter, boosting at 428 hertz, 3 dB. Because the makeup gain is on, it's actually turning everything down as it raises the volume at that frequency. I'm also using the white 2A on here. So this low cut kind of helps with kind of the low balance in the overheads. The left and right with just slightly off, and doing it in the side channel kind of takes care of that. And then that's going into a reverb. So this is the reverb that I'm using for all the drum tracks. Just Valhalla Room, Punchy Drums preset. I may have changed some things. I'm not really sure. But yeah, seems to work. Let's move on to bass tracks. So I was given a bass DI and an amp track. So sounds like this overall. And without my processing, it sounds like this. And so I was going for a more distorted, grindy kind of sound with the soft amp PSA, which I've featured in a video before. I've got the Air Music Tech compressor, REEQ, and Real Bus. I think the main thing of note here with the bass track is that I'm changing the blend of these 3 mics and the overall bass level in each section of the song. And so let's say the verses sound like that, and then when it goes to the chorus, and so I'm changing from -31 up to -4 in different sections of the song, and I think that's worth doing. You can push up things when you want more pick attack, turn it down, you want it to kind of hide behind the guitars and things like that. Let's talk about the guitars now. There's quite a lot of guitars. I actually didn't do very much processing on each individual track, or really any. It was all just balances, and because they were produced really well, all the mics sounded good. There was no like terrible fizzing or anything like that. So I was just really just enhancing what was there. So I've got a bit going on with this API style EQ. So low cut, 31 hertz, a little bit of a boost at 63, very slight cut at 125 hertz, 0.8 at 1K, 0.8 at 2K, and 1.2 at 8K, minus 0.4 at 16K. I'm pushing the input gain a little bit and pulling back the output gain. I actually didn't use the EQ or the preamp modeling on this, but I think that's because it didn't really work when combined with Saturator X. I'm using the Master Plus 12 mode, 6 dB, 6.5 dB boost on there. Parallel aggressor, 36% on the spank, 39 on the heat. They're all this stuff is pretty high up, just adding more and more edge, more saturation to the guitars. And some tape saturation from Real Bus. So all the guitar processing is just on the guitar bus.
He says the place is
So I'm really pushing that a lot to get it sounding really edgy. And I like what that's doing. Let's take it out of solo.
He says the place is still available. It's like it's straight out of a movie scene. Oh.
There isn't really a good way to demonstrate the before and after of this because it's just adding so much saturation and volume. And I may have even gone too far with it, but kind of it does sound the way I think it should. So that brings us to the vocal tracks, and there's not a whole lot of tracks in here. There's kind of a verse track and a chorus track. There's some echo tracks with effects, and there are the whoa-oh tracks and stuff like that, the background layers. a lot of thought went into how this would be used in the mix when they were recording. So when there's a mono vocal, there is a stereo backing track. The whoa parts are a middle, a left, and a right track. So it's really good to think about those sorts of things. Let's have a look at the main vocal processing. Mostly EQ on here.
I found a little piece of paradise. It's nothing fancy, but it's kind of nice.
I'm pretty sure that he's done some editing already. There's no background noise there to remove. So that's always nice. Some of the processing that you might be used to seeing just isn't there because these were edited and consolidated before I got them. So just using a little bit of EQ on here.
It's nothing fancy, but it's kind of nice.
And without EQ.
It's nothing fancy, but it's kind of nice.
And again, a lot of the processing is done on the vocals bus. I've got a de-esser. I've got an EQ. I've got a second de-esser. I've got a compressor. And I've got another compressor. I'll bypass the vocal bus effects and then put them back on.
I found a little piece of paradise. It's nothing fancy, but it's kind of nice.
When I'm actually mixing, I don't worry about that volume boost because I'm bringing up the lead vocal into this sort of chain, and then, that determines the overall volume. So I'm never flipping these on and off in the mix. So yeah, so I don't worry about volume differences. But it does make doing a demonstration like this a little bit more difficult. And so the chorus vocal, again, just an EQ on there. It may even be the same EQ settings. In the background vocal bus, we've got an EQ cutting all the lows here and just a little bit of a high curve, 2.5 dB or something. This is a very interesting EQ. I recommend doing it just for really quick tone shaping. It does a lot very quickly. And it's unlike many other EQs that you've probably used before. So I've got some de-essing, I've got some compression and some more compression. And then I'm using the vocal doubler from Isotope. Individual tracks going into this do not have any effects. And without effects. So that bit of saturation actually comes from the T-Rax EQ here. Kind of overloading the preamp section of that. Kind of a louder chorus background vocal.
Life is too short to waste another minute. Don't wait around, everything has a limit. It always seems like it's just out of reach.
So that really smooths things out. When he's singing loudly like that, the compressors really kick in and even it out.
Life is too short to waste another minute.
I'm doing about 20 dB of gain reduction on this LA2A style compressor. So besides that, there is one other effect in here that's pretty cool. So in verse 2, there's this call and response kind of effect.
It's on a crummy street, but Oceanside. It has a vibe that I...
And let me play it with the effect.
It's on a crummy street, but Oceanside. It has a vibe.
I tried a few different things to get the right effect for this. I think I first tried tape cassette and it didn't quite work for this effect. So what I ended up doing was just Devil Lock Deluxe from Soundtoys. Crush at 3, crunch at 5, darkness at 2. I've also got some EQ here and, just a really extreme kind of telephone effect.
It's on a crummy street, but Oceanside.
And because these are split up onto separate tracks, I'm just lowering the volume. So the first one I've got at -1, the second one is at -6, and the third one is at -12. So I guess now we should look at the master bus. We've got a Toneboosters real bus, SSL style bus compressor, Soundtoys CQ, 3-band EQ, 2 shelves and 1 parametric, and then Ozone 9 with a bit of EQ, bit of dynamics, and a maximizer. You know, I may have actually used the Master Assistant on this just for a quick reference kind of thing. This wasn't the actual mastering job. Maybe I will just keep that one off.
Life is too short to waste another minute. Don't wait around, everything has a limit. It always seems like it's just out of reach. Let's say it's not by that sweet house right on the beach.
Often I'm adding in bass with this EQ on the master bus, but in this case, I'm just doing a little bit. Often I'm adding in a little bit of lows and highs on the master bus, and I put that on very early in the mix. But in this case, I'm actually not adding any lows because I felt like I had enough in the kick mic and the bass guitar. But I am doing a very slight cut at 1 kilohertz, and I'm doing a 3.6 dB boost on the high shelf. I'm not really sure what frequency. I think the steeper you go, the more frequencies get affected by this. But yeah, this was something I think I added fairly early on. After I got the rough balances, I put that on just to kind of improve the sound. And then I went through the individual tracks and added more processing. So that's it for this video. There's a lot of noise out there now, and pretty much done anyways. If you like the song, you can download it wherever you get your music online. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.